to this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Radell Lewis. He is the host of the Purple Political Breakdown podcast. Welcome to the show, Radell.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Like you said, my name's Radell Lewis. I host a podcast called The Purple Political Breakdown. And the goal of the podcast at the end of the day, to kind of summarize it for the people, is that we focus on solutions. We don't focus on the toxicity back and forth. We don't focus on the clickbait. We don't focus on all that filler stuff that means nothing and goes nowhere. We have discourse, we have discussion for political solutions, cultural solutions on the more important issues, whether that's abortion, racism, healthcare. We cover it all.
Absolutely, absolutely. And as the space globally, in politics, as the space for discussions on difficult issues is getting less and less, such podcasts are certainly, a fresh breath of air, and that is going to be very, very useful. And it is that is why we are talking, and we will be talking about, the current political landscape in the U.S. But then U.S. is what whatever happens in the U.S. also impacts the world. So in that context, we will also bring that the global politics into that. But first, to understand from you, I am not in the US, I'm in India, New Delhi, you are in the US. So, to help us understand what exactly is happening in the US, as per Radell Lewis, in terms of political, what's the political landscape at the moment, with so much of heat getting generated with upcoming presidential elections?
Yeah, so there's really two ways to look about the current political landscape in America. And the two ways are as follows. The first way is what media and social media is showing you. And the second way is what the people are showing you. Now, it's important to distinguish the two because media and social media obviously sheds the worst of people, the worst of humanity at the end of the day. When at the end of the day, when it comes to America and the issues we go about, a lot of the kind of worst topics that people are frightened from America, for example, with our the gun crisis or the trans stuff, that stuff is a big minority situation. Gun shootings are big minority situations in terms of police killings and unwarranted killings. So all of these are minority issues. They are issues. They need to be addressed, but they make it seem like America is a war zone where obviously we are not. We are one of the most peaceful countries in the world generally, but we have a large population and stuff does happen. So this is when we address the kind of media and social media aspect, and this is where everybody kind of gets the picture, the framework of how America is, for good reason, because like I said, it highlights the worst of what America is going through. It's extremely toxic, extremely negative. And the two sides, in my opinion, especially when you compare it to a lot of different other eras, I feel like is the most divisive it's ever been because of how invested everybody is into politics because of the introduction of social media and media. It gives everybody the ability to say what they want. It gives everybody a voice. And by giving everybody a voice, everybody's opinions are going to combat one another. Now, the problem with social media and the media right now is what they're doing is they're creating echo chambers and they are pushing and forcing people to a side. So we're decreasing the middle, the nuanced perspective that I would have, and making you choose. Are you a lefty or are you a right conservative? Who are you? If you're the other side, I hate you, and that's all that matters.
Right, right. That may matter for the politician, but for general people, everything matters. It's related to even good politics. Bad politics also impacts them. And also, what matters is that everyday matter also impacts their life, their families. And that is why they look at politics in different ways. Some people look at it positively, a lot of people look at it negatively, some people look at it to be away from you, from the politics. But then the fact is, Radel, that even if you are not interested in politics, politics is interested in you. So you cannot run away from it, because you can't crib about the politicians you have chosen if you are not participating in it. So, from a political perspective, or looking at the politics down there, is looking at politics from here in India. I would only be able to read what is, what is available on the internet, or on the newspapers, or on television. For an outsider, how would you like to explain the present situation? You said gun crisis. It's a crisis, but when we read about this impacts. This gives a very different impression. Like, why don't they just ban it? We can live without a gun, like we have been living here. We don't have a gun license. It's like you apply for a tank license, maybe then you might perhaps get a gun license. You got to show a huge amount of paperwork, and you show that there is a threat perception to you. So those are different cultures. US is the biggest democracy. India is the largest democracy of the world, and there is so much similarity. So help us understand in a much more distinctive manner, like, all these things. Does it matter so much in elections? What are the issues that the elections is going to be fought this time? Is it about, because you see, a lot of young generation today on the business front, we are talking about generation Z, and generation, all the younger people. But on the political side, we understand that there are a lot of people who are of a much more older generation, and they will decide about the fate of a young America, and also about a global population. How does that work? How should we understand? What do we make out of what is happening on the political side in the United States of America?
So to kind of break this down into a segment, of course, first things first, when it comes down to the gun crisis, the reason why America will never get rid of guns is very simple. It's embedded in our constitution. It's embedded into our culture. It's embedded to who we are, and for a good reason. Because America obviously started in contrast to the empire that was Great Britain back in the day. And the reason why the Second Amendment was implemented is to have the ability to combat a tyrannical government. So that is one of the core reasons why the Second Amendment exists. Now, with hundreds of years of that same kind of sentiment and same type of kind of instituted law of like what it means to be America, this will never go away. It's unrealistic. Now, obviously, if you were to recreate or create a brand new society based on what we know now about guns and the questionable usefulness it is in society, I would say probably most societies would kind of recreate a society without guns being the forefront of their culture. But, that is just, it is what it is. America will never get rid of it. And the question on whether or not they should is much more nuanced than ban all guns versus keep all guns. At the end of the day, there is purpose behind having a gun, especially in this gun culture, because obviously people have guns, people love guns. And the best way to kind of protect yourselves, especially at your own home, is probably with a gun. So that is just how America is. But it's not really a situation where no matter where you go, you're going to get shot by some random that's going to bring out a gun. That's not realistic. And there is some nuance in other countries because a lot of other countries, even though they don't have guns, they have other type of violence. And even though it's in scale, it might not be as big. At the end of the day, humans will be violent, criminals will be violent. So that's something to consider. As for current elections, it seems to me the forefront of how they're going to kind of do their campaigns is focusing on the social issues, which is unfortunate to me because a lot of this trans stuff, in my opinion, should not be as important of an issue than it is. I think that you could argue that some people that go through the mental illness have a right to live their way they want, but the more we kind of put this in the forefront of politics, the more people are going to talk about it. What I personally believe we should be focusing more, that's a little bit more productive to American society, is our public education system. I think for the most part, a lot of people think it's failing. And so we definitely need to work on it, especially in the impoverished communities. And the economy itself should be addressed as well, because we know, at the very least in America, the middle class is shrinking, the poor class is growing, and the richer are getting richer. That is a product of capitalism, but we should definitely address it, of course. And the third one I want to bring up is our healthcare system. I'm not for universal healthcare necessarily, but I do think there should be an appropriate nuance of healthcare for the more impoverished communities, especially considering it's so hard to get insurance for so many people and get the proper care they need. So there's absolutely issues that are more important that we need to focus on. But the one that gets in the headlines, the ones that conservatives love to talk about and the lefties love to defend, it's stuff regarding social issues. It's stuff regarding trans stuff. It's stuff regarding systematic racism, which, it's unfortunate, but that's how you kind of get people emotionally invested when you talk about social scenarios instead of realistic political scenarios. So that's what's going on currently in America. And we're going to have to see what happens in the next election, because there's even controversy with our politicians. Trump is going on trial. Joe Biden's getting older, and people are very unreliant on Biden, considering he's getting so much older, and people don't really like that. Also, people don't really like how easygoing he is as a president. Some people want a firmer hand. So the question of Biden is definitely up in the air. We got people like RFK, Robert F. Kennedy, who's a Democrat who he says he's not anti-vax, but a lot of things he says contradicts that in terms of all the conspiracies he says about COVID vaccines and the fact that he thinks the CIA are like the worst organization or institution there is. So we have him as a prime candidate. And then, of course, DeSantis, who is doing a lot of questionable things back in Florida, which he's a senator of. And he's doing things regarding, again, trans issues and, again, racism stuff. So there's four of our prime candidates right now. It's questionable how great they really are, and will if they will fix the country as a whole.
Right, right. So, what is the hope for the future for the US? Looking at it from sitting down there in the US, how do you see the next, say, 10 months or so, and looking it towards the future? How does it look with the type of people who are coming up on the political arena, these elections? How do you see that? Do you think public education, then anybody will do anything about the rich poor divide? Forget about the rich getting poor, even about the middle class people who are becoming poorer or becoming a part of the poorer lots. How does that work? And even in terms of the healthcare, because these are issues of very, very importance. Do you think uh, people in the government in the US today, tomorrow, will be looking at these issues much more closer, or is it that you need to just bring in much more attention towards this, or it will just be much more that powerful people will continue to control the policy making, like it is happening in several other parts of the world. So US cannot be just the only one. How does it work? What is the way towards the future you see for the beyond the elections? That is it good? Is it not so good?
So, me personally, I think the best way to kind of go about this, especially in democratic nations that have the right of free speech, is a lot of the individuals have to start speaking up. Now, one of the great things about social media, even though I kind of ranted on social media a little bit before, is that it allows a lot of people to have a voice. So, something like my podcast, for example, allows me to have a voice that can influence and help people understand a lot of different issues and the nuance behind a lot of these issues as well. So, individuals making their voice heard on the platform that are not in the pockets of these politicians, because we know at the end of the day, all of these bigger media corporations are very much influenced from these politicians or influenced from their political ideology or influenced by the big tech companies, the big companies that put stakes and stocks in their media corporations. So there's a lot of sway when it comes down to it. Whereas individuals can, for the most part, unless they get shady too, which is more than possible, but it's harder to do with so many individuals having so many different voices, have the opportunity to influence a lot of people at a large scale. And by doing that, we can try to implement something in society that is a lot more productive. So there are things that are happening currently that is good. For example, a lot of these politicians are starting to appear on podcasts. Now, the great thing about that is, like I said, these are individuals. Now, my hope for the more politicians that go on podcasts is that these politicians go on podcasts that will truly challenge them, not podcasts that will endorse their campaign and make them look better, but ones that will truly challenge who they are and find out if you're really going to try to help the country that you said you're going to help. So that is a potential benefit moving forward. Another potential benefit moving forward is that we can start incentivizing that a lot of individuals should be much more involved in terms of political advocacy. There's a lot of people who are big talk, no do action. So one of the things that you can always do is be involved at the very least in your local elections, your state elections, your local areas, and your community. And the purpose behind being involved here is one, you can get a better understanding and a better interaction with your, senators, with your mayors, with your governors, because they're local. So they're much easier to contact and get a hold of and to confront compared to the president of the United States or to Congress as a whole. Right. So because the good thing about America and some other democratic nations is that there's two aspects of elections, there are two aspects of politics, and that's state and federal. And state politics should honestly be more important, but we've kind of delegated, which is kind of a reverse order. The states are starting to delegate a lot of things to the federal government. And that's because people are just not getting involved enough. So getting involved, a lot of the public education issues are, for the most part, things that state governments have to handle anyway. A lot of the police department issues are stuff state governments have to handle anyway. Marijuana, healthcare to an extent, like abortion laws are to the states now. So there's so many things that you innately care about that can be addressed if you tackle it at the state level. And the more senators that are on board that you vote that actually care about what you're talking about, those individuals will get in Congress. And at the end of the day, even though the president is the hallmarker or the picture head of a lot of federal governments for a lot of areas, the one that truly has the most power, if we're being completely honest, is Congress. So this is a big way with the addition of social media for people to get involved and people to make change. Is if you listening or you watching or you kind of scrolling through social media, if you get involved, that's the first step. It's This is when making a vote and getting involved matters the most, especially since we can kind of come together a little bit better with the addition of social media.
Absolutely, absolutely. What about economics or the economy? A lot of these issues, are they getting too much of discussion there? For example, the rising interest rates, the inflation, a lot of that worry is there. Also the impact of the Chinese economy on the US economy. Now US is also, along with certain other countries, are trying to decouple from the Chinese economy, and they are moving businesses out of China to other countries including India. How much that do you think is going to be part of this political discourse, or is at the moment? How do you see that? Because uh, if by the way the global economy, or the US economy is getting impacted by different reasons, a lot of reasons are also related to China, then US might be in a difficult spot going forward, because it has to bring its economy back into strong form. And as I said, other countries will start looking at it as the only power that needs to be engaged, and not as much with China, because China is very aggressive on it at the moment, and it's forging new alliances, not just in with the US but also in the Latin American countries, with other countries. A lot of international visitors have gone to international figures have gone to China very recently. Your own former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger was also there in China at the age of 100. I don't know what was the discussion, but all these things send out different signals to a person sitting out here in India.
Yeah, so if I'm being completely honest, when it comes down to it, in terms of my understanding of international politics, is not nearly as strong as obviously domestic. So I don't try to pretend that I know things that I do not. But from my perception, from what I do know, it China is definitely becoming kind of a country that is trying to challenge America. As we know, China tried to get in a deal with Russia, of course, to try to challenge America's currency. Now we're in a very interesting position right now as the United States of America with the Russia-Ukraine stuff that is going on currently. And if Ukraine successfully pushes back and brokers a deal with Russia, that would obviously impact Russia in a grand way. And then that also sets the precedent that, hey, China, if you try to mess with Taiwan, like we've done with Ukraine, we'll get involved. But even more so because Taiwan and America's relationship is much more strong, and our involvement probably would be much more involved. So China and Russia kind of know that America is watching them. But something that we have to understand when it comes to China making all the moves that they are to trying to challenge the United States of America is because they kind of run under a rule of communism. They are, in order for them to kind of hold on to their power, they really have to incorporate all the other countries that they're getting involved with a similar type of principle. One thing that one of my co-hosts brought up and I've heard before is that in terms of the world, democracy, our Democrat kind of ideology, can survive in a world that communism does exist in. But communism cannot survive in a world where democracy exists. So they're going to have to turn all the countries that they're trying to recruit into a communist nation that follows very similar principles. And I don't think that would work. Now, will China eventually match America in terms of, being the number one economic power? I think it's very much possible, for sure, especially if we don't, as a country, transition to a lot more domestic kind of manufacturing, especially if we don't transition more to like other ways of technology that we can personally create. I've talked about it before in my podcast where we can kind of transition to creating more of our domestic created vehicles, AI, software, phone technology. There's stuff that we can create that we don't technically need a lot of these other countries to create. Obviously, there's some minerals and materials that we don't have, we would have to be in communication with certain countries for. But there's more stuff we can do as a country, and by doing that, we can be a lot more self-sustainable. So China will try to increase their power, but I don't think China is a country that, of at the end of the day, in terms of when everything's said and done, will be able to last. And if they try to kind of force their principles of communism onto other countries, then it could get really, really messy. So we're gonna have to see how that all plays out, especially the first domino seems to be this Russia versus and Ukraine situation and how that works out.
Absolutely, absolutely. You have put things very very nicely in front of us, and I'm sure a lot of I end up as a better who has a better understanding of the political climate in the US at the moment. What is your guess? Will it be a Republican president or a Democrat going forward?
My guess, man, it's so tough right now because Trump is trying to go to prison. DeSantis is warning about the worst stuff, and he's scaring me a little bit because he's kind of getting too much endowed into these social issues. RFK's anti-vax. I think more than likely Joe Biden gets reelected. That is my guess. I think he gets reelected. Honestly, compared to the other three prime candidates, I probably would pick Biden if I'm being completely honest, because DeSantis has been going off the deep end for some reason. So I would probably go with Biden for now, unless there's another prime candidate. So more than likely, a Democrat will be staying in office.
Okay, okay. Thank you very much for openly at least voicing your opinion or your understanding on that. Tell us a bit more about your podcast so that people can, can listen to it and understand more about what you talk about in your podcast. This is one episode. They will get many episodes from you and understand better about the political system down there.
All right. So yeah, my podcast again is called Purple Political Breakdown. The name is very self-explanatory as we break down a lot of issues from the middle, primarily from me because I ride the middle. I care about logic. I don't really care about what side you're on, and I do tend to have co-hosts on that lean left and right. That really tells you I can have a conversation with anybody. They lean left or right. We can have a conversation and we can discuss these issues. I also have great guests on, of course, that we talk about specific topics and political issues as well. We do it every Monday, Thursday in terms of the audio dropping every at 8 a.m. EST if you want to listen to the newest episode, and then we also try to go live as well, so people can see us live and kind of see what we're talking about and potentially how much that grows. We'll also get questions answered and people voicing their own concerns in the future. So we focus on solutions. I mean, that is the biggest part of the podcast. We focus on solutions on the biggest issues that's going on. We've come up with a lot of different scenarios, a lot of different compromises in these different circumstances. I guess an example would be when we talked about the situation with systematic discrimination in the workplace. I had a great guest come on, Dr. Frank Douglas. He came on, he talked about his solution on how we could fix that. And it was a great solution because he focused on the individual. He didn't say, oh, yeah, we should tear down our institutions to kind of fix it or create a policy to fix it. He said, you as an individual, you have to address your employer, you have to address your boss, you have to tell him what he's doing wrong, address the issues that is going on, and make him understand where you're coming from, break down that barrier of that implicit bias he may have. And that's an amazing idea, amazing solution. So this is just one of many that we come up with that we think can be applied to a lot of different levels of the government and society. And moving forward, we'll keep on doing it and we'll see how far we can go. Maybe one day we'll have the president, we'll grill him and see if he really is capable of, protecting our country. Who knows?
Absolutely, absolutely. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
No problem. Thank you for having me.